Hi, I'm going to talk a little bit about Britive's MCP server. If you're not familiar with MCP servers, it's a way for an AI agent or agentic workflow to connect to services like SaaS applications, databases, even local file systems. It makes it a lot easier to wire up these agents to things via tools that are exposed with the MCP servers, as opposed to having to write against the API for every single SaaS application out there. It makes it really easy to use something like Claude Desktop to use natural language to interact with all these different programs and services. So with Britive, what this enables you to do is have access to all of our granular access profiles. And I'll show why this is really powerful by giving a little bit of a demonstration of what you could do with, let's say, Snowflake MCP server hooked up. So I've got my Snowflake over here on the right. Let me go ahead and refresh this just to show there's nothing but this sample data. And if I look at my user profile, I have nothing but a public role. So we're going to flip back over to Claude Desktop, where I have installed both this is how you have, it shows you your MCP tools. So I have Britive with all of these different tools available from our server, as well as the Snowflake MCP server. So I'm going to start by asking it to, oops, list all my Snowflake databases. Now, I've already authenticated into Snowflake with my credentials, and I have also authenticated into Britive. So at this point, the LLM is essentially acting on my behalf with my credentials and my permissions. So what it's returned is just the two databases that I have, which which is good, right? So in this case, the agent doesn't have access to anything that I don't. Well, that was cool, but it's not very useful because there's not really any information in there. So let's say that I wanted to pull some customer information and I happen to know where that data is located because I do have access, it's just not enabled right now. So let me paste in a little prep so I don't have to type it all out, but I'm going to ask it to list the customers in a specific table, and I've told it that it is in the customer data database. I'm also going to give it a little hint and say to check out more access if needed. Now, this will be a hint to the Britive MCP server, or for the LLM to use the Britive MCP server tools to programmatically check out an access profile. So the first thing it did was it tried to list the objects again, and it said, hey, I don't see one of those. That makes sense because it doesn't have access to that. Well, now the Claude is prompting me to use this extra tool. So this is the Britive access checkout. I'm going to go ahead and allow that. And it's going to try to make an attempt to, looks like this time it is trying to check out the profile. And there it is. So you see a little toast over here. It is checked out this customer data access profile, which is going to have additional privileges. So what Brightive has just done is just in time, it has elevated my account into a different privilege or permission set. So same credentials. If I reload the window, now we see that I have this extra Snowflake customer data table. This is what I was asking for. And then if I look at my profile again, I have this additional customer data access role. So the model reached out to Britive, found the access profile that it needed, elevated it, and then it's continued to compile a summary of some of the customer information that I had asked for. And so it did that all by itself. And it can keep going. This is really where Britive's granular access profiles make these MCP workflows not just more powerful, but a lot more secure because my account isn't just sitting there with that static access to those customer records, nor does the LLM or the AI agent have that access regularly. It's using my account. So now let's say I want to do an action that requires a little bit more information. So let's see, list the Snowflake access logs for the last 60 minutes. Now I've already given it the prompt about elevating access before. So what it should do is remember that context and try to check out more access if needed. So this is an administrative action. So I have this account admins for Snowflake profiles set up. And what I expect the model is eventually going to do is figure out that it needs to go and try to pull that, so to check out access for that, so that it can then go and pull the necessary records from Snowflake. And it looks like it's trying something first. Sometimes this can take a little bit with the LLM. It's interesting technology. It is non-deterministic. So basically, if you ask it to do the same thing 2 times, it may or may not try the same approach or give you the same output. So in this case, it looks like it is trying something that doesn't seem like it's going to get what it wants. So we're going to wait for it to finish here. And then I imagine it will proceed and we will see what it finds. Okay, so it's figured out that it doesn't have access to those audit logs with the current permissions. So now it's going back for a profile and I'm getting prompted once again. So I know that the model is trying to access more of my permissions. I'm going to go ahead and allow that. And as you see over here, it figured that out. So the account admin profile, because it had listed the profiles again, and it found that this is one that looks like it should be able to use. And if I go back over to my databases, I expect I'm going to see more than just these 3 databases, and I should have some additional roles as well. And there we go. So now I have full access to all of the databases, and I have way more roles, including that account administrative role. And then it's going to go back and continue to look for the data. I'll just stop that right here so we don't have to wait for it in this case. But what we're going to do now is I'm going to just say, all done. And what the model should do is clean up after itself. Now, we don't want to have standing access. And if I look over here, these profiles actually are very short-lived. They are for just 30 minutes or so. And that's a best practice, right? Because if I'm doing an administrative function, I should be able to get in, perform what I need, and then not have that access sitting around for a long time. This is really beneficial because I don't even necessarily have to do this every single time. Now, once the models have this context, so I'm doing this for the first time here, it will know to do it automatically. And notice I didn't tell it to check anything in, I just said I'm all done. And it realized that I had 2 separate access profiles, that customer data access profile, as well as the account admin profile. And it has checked both of those in. Over here, I see one is already checked in. Sometimes it can take a minute just to sync between Snowflake and Britive when it's disabling the roles. So let's see if that is gone yet. So it looks like it's still processing the check-in. If I go back over here to Snowflake, it may not be fully done yet. I still have access to that. We'll just give it one more second. And while we're waiting for that to finish, just want to point out that this is really something you could do with any SaaS service, or again, like databases or servers. So you don't need to provide that high level static access at all times. In fact, we would recommend that whatever identity or permissions that you're using in these MCP workflows would start as low as possible. Ideally, have access to nothing. And then with the Britive MCP server included in that workflow, only as that access is needed to a particular resource, let the model figure out what profile it needs with the minimum amount of access and then clean it up when it's done. So we've checked that in. We'll come back over here to Snowflake and I expect everything will be back as it was. And there we are. The model's cleaned up after itself. So I hope you enjoyed. That was just some of the many capabilities in the Britive MCP server. And we'll be back with more later.